I'd like to talk about Consorting with Spirits, Your Guide to Working with Invisible Allies by Jason Miller. I'm a relative noob, so instead of providing a detailed review or overview, I'd like to go through this book about conjuring spirits and highlight one or two things in each chapter that struck me as particularly interesting. Hopefully that'll help you understand the structure of the book and whether or not the content might be of interest to you. There are many detailed reviews and interviews out there, so I encourage you to check those out too. So, starting off with the acknowledgements, the author thanks various spirits, which I think is mighty nice of him, and encouraging considering the theme of the book. He also thanks his deadline-flexible publisher, and I'm grateful he made the book available through easily accessible means. Not that I have anything against authors who charge an arm and a leg for one of 10 artisanal copies of their precious tome, wrapped in dragon skin and inked with the blood of unicorns. Next is the foreword, written by Matt Oren, best-selling author of Psychic Witch and Mastering Magic. He's not really a grimoire magician, he's more witchy and pagany, but he usefully adds that when it comes to spirits, it's hard for you not to bump into them if you're doing magic. And it's poignant, he writes from Antioch, California, considering the important role sorcerer Saint Cyprian plays in the book. Cyprian hails from another Antioch, an ancient city in what is now Turkey. In his introduction, Jason Miller explains the title of the book, saying it comes from the name of a criminal offense a few centuries back in merry old witch-burning England. But also points to a broader lesson. Working with spirits isn't a one-off deal, but rather a long-term process of building up a relationship. He adds he offers 3 approaches throughout the book, Christian grimoire, pagan, and Luciferian, so there's a definite hint of the forbidden here. In Chapter 1, the author asks, "What is a spirit?" He says it's not just some mental construct you believe in. It really feels like it's an independent entity outside of you. And if spirits are organized consciousness, as he suggests, then there are lots of them around, including you, me, and an awful lot of nature out there, as animists would surely concur. In Chapter 2, he talks about different levels of reality and how spirits might find it downright uncomfortable to show up on our regular plane of existence. What we do in ritual, he says, is to create a bridge between our plane and a spirit's plane. He describes his first spirit conjuration when he was 16, and he also talks about so-called true appearance. A conjurer can demand a spirit show up in a way that will be pleasing to the eye, because what a spirit really looks like might scare the bejesus out of you, or the heck out of you, however you want to put it. In Chapter 3, the author talks about how some people seem to have psychic experiences at the drop of a hat, while others struggle to pick up anything much at all. Interestingly, the supersensitive types aren't necessarily better at spirit conjuration because they're so prone to false positives. Getting a grip on one's mental activity is therefore pretty important. And Jason Miller talks about meditation, that's the sit down and shut up idea, as well as just doing nothing, which is not the same as meditation, and can be a difficult practice just because so many things vie for our attention nowadays. In Chapter 4, Jason Miller likes to point out that relationships with non-corporeal spirits aren't necessarily that different from relationships with people. We earn respect through our track record and mutual contacts, and we judge others similarly. The chapter ends with the Spirit Feast offering, which I've been doing twice daily, though I had to give up on the candle burning and incense as I have a bad reaction to smoke. Hopefully this won't get too many spirits inflamed. But here's the underlying point. Offerings are a pretty big deal in Jason Miller's system, and I'm glad that trying to perform the Spirit Feast is chipping away at some of my psychological hurdles. Chapter 5 says when you pray, you're not expecting a spirit to show up and say everything's going to be A-OK. It's one-way communication, which is fine if you want something in particular rather than some kind of spirit presence. Prayer is a way to help build up a relationship with spirits, and if you add offerings and so on, it moves along a continuum until you're getting into conjuration territory anyway. I've been doing the 3 prayers from this chapter as part of my daily practice, though I'm not entirely sure doing 3 prayers to different recipients doesn't partially take away from the charm. There's a prayer to the Greek goddess of sorcery, Hecate, to sorcerer-turned-Christian martyr, Saint Cyprian of Antioch, and to fallen angel Lucifer, who comes across less as a big baddie here and more of a defender of individuality versus the collective. Chapter 6 has a lot of fascinating detail, but comes down to this. Deal with the local spirits. They have their spiritual boots on the ground and can get things done. Chapter 7 talks about being in the danger zone. Jason Miller already wrote a book, recently revised, called Protection and Reversal Magic. so he defers the details to that book. He does, however, say there's a fine line between the Hollywood horror of The Exorcist and a glib attitude that says nothing can go wrong. Despite his big book on protection, this chapter includes protection spells you can recite to Hecate, the Archangel Metatron, or the plain old devil. But most interestingly, he asks, if you have the power to do the summoning, why would you suddenly not have the power to protect yourself, either on your own or with spirit allies? So now we've reached our feature presentation, a relatively kind and gentle way to conjure, with exhaustive detail about the tools required, the consecration of said tools, how to draw your circles, what the ceremony itself entails, how to summon more spirits than the examples Astaroth, and how to summon a spirit using not a Christian grimoire kind of approach, but one based on Hecate or Lucifer. I'd say this is beyond my accessorizing ambition for the moment, but it's good to know the details are there. In Chapter 9, we are reminded that some spirits are pleasant and some not so much, so be prepared to act tough if you have to. In any event, remember that the spirits you're conjuring are kind of like people, and sometimes the carrot works, and sometimes the stick. In Chapter 10, we learn that instead of name-dropping Moses or some other spiritual bigwig, you might want to develop a relationship with helper spirits or saints who can help contact the ultimate target. It also might improve your spiritual street cred. Jason Miller also talks about mall Santas. Children soon realize Santa can't be everywhere at the same time, so the local mall Santa must just be a representative of the real Santa. The goddess Hecate taught Jason Miller a lot of magic, but some of that teaching was provided not by Hecate herself, but by night nymphs in her service. But do be careful if the mall Santa claims to be the real thing. Chapter 11 is mostly about what a healthy relationship with a spirit looks like. Basically, you develop healthy relationships with spirits by doing reality checks, asking spirits for a quicker way to contact them, keeping your promises, be suspicious if they never contradict you, and be precise with your language. Jason Miller answers questions from his students in Chapter 12. First question is how to tell when your ego is interfering with your spiritual perceptions, and last question is about open versus closed shops in the spiritual world. Jason Miller finishes off with his unnumbered Chapter 13 by urging people to keep in mind the context of what they're doing. It's not just invocations, it's about relationships, and he's tried to emphasize how to do this in the book. It's a practical, more than a theoretical approach. And finally, there are 2 short pages of endnotes that tell the reader, among other things, that the feast days of the 2 St. Cyprians, the one we're interested in, and some other saint, are separated by 9 days, and we learn that Jason Miller came up with the term mirror realm years before the cinematic Doctor Strange started going on about it. There's no index, which makes me sad. But this is a pretty common problem with books nowadays, whatever the topic. In any event, this is a great work insofar as my first, second, or third eye can tell. It got me doing some more rituals, and maybe if I can stop feeling so incensed over incense, I'll try some other practices described in the book. And on that note, happy reading, and happy conjuring.